Diplomacy is back. Linda Thomas Greenfield is confirmed as Biden's UN envoy. However you say that. Ms. Thomas Greenfield, a career diplomat, will go to the UN calling for the United States to re-engage with the global body while dealing with the Republican concerns about her prior remarks on China. Shortly after Linda Thomas Greenfield was announced as President Biden's pick for ambassador to the United Nations, she introduced the American public to a new phrase, gumbo diplomacy. Interesting phrase. The term, Mrs. Thomas Greenfield said, explains her professional philosophy developed over more than 3 decades in foreign service. Diplomacy is driven by relationships, and talking about difficult topics while chopping onions for a gumbo sauce can break barriers and foster success, she said. Now, with the Senate confirming Ms. Thomas Greenfield on Tuesday by a vote of 78 to 20. Ms. Greenfield is black. Yes, that's what was so interesting about her to me. That's what made me want to read the article. I was really interested. I forgot that part. I buried the lead. My bad. Now, with the Senate confirming Ms. Thomas Greenfield on Tuesday by a vote of 78 to 20, her diplomatic approach will be taken to the United Nations as she calls for American resurgence in a global body from which the United States retreated during the Trump administration. America is back, Ms. Thomas Greenfield, 68, said when Ms. Biden announced her nomination in November, echoing a phrase used by the president. Multilateralism is back. Diplomacy is back. Ms. Thomas Greenfield will have to plunge immediately and publicly into the UN's work. Her confirmation came just as the United States is about to assume the presidency at the 15 blah, 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 because it's going to get long if I keep on going. But let me skip down to the good part. Okay. From 2008 to 2012, she serves as an ambassador to Liberia. Okay. Before moving on to become the Director General of the Foreign Service for about 1 year. From 2013 to 2017, she served as the top United States diplomat for African affairs, where she helped oversee the response to the Ebola epidemic. We know how that went. In 2017, she was among the diplomats pushed out of the department by the Secretary of State, Rex W. Tillerson. Despite the warm responses, Ms. Thomas Greenfield nomination received the diplomats and former state Senate official Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill and showed them some concerns. In her confirmation last month, it quickly became clear that Ms. Thomas Greenfield would get pointed questions from Senate Republicans about her views on China based on an optimistic speech she had given in October 2019 on Africa's relationship with both China and the United States. So we see what kind of black person this is. But we already know who she was working for. In the speech at the Savannah State University, she extolled the benefits of an American corporation with China in cultivating strengthened relationships with the developing countries of Africa, one of her main areas of expertise. So this is the woman that Biden has now nominated or confirmed as Biden's UN envoy. The speech conspicuously lacked criticism on China's human rights record or pattern of predatory lending practices in developing countries desperate for investment. It was sponsored by the Confucius Institute, a Chinese government educational organization that American officials have accused of spreading pro-China propaganda in schools throughout the United States and elsewhere. Senators Ted Cruz of Texas and Mark Rubio of Florida in particular focused on that speech during her confirmation hearing, using it to press the idea that Ms. Thomas Greenfield, was perhaps soft on China and naive about the Confucius Institute, or both. Mrs. Thomas Greenfield expressed regret to having agreed to make the speech, but contested the institution about her record. If you look at what I have done prior to that, she said, there is no question that I am not at all naive about what the Chinese are doing, and that I have called them out on a regular basis, which included her sharp criticism of China at other points in the hearing. So the question is, if that's the case, so do you make it a habit, Ms. Greenfield, of changing your views when someone pays you? Because if your track record was to question China, but when the Confucius Institute paid you to come and do a speech in another country, you became a puppet. Ms. Thomas Greenfield has promised to aggressively confront China at the United Nations, where it is now the second biggest financial contributor to the 193 members, behind only the United States, and have moved in recent years to gain leadership roles in important agencies and impose its own authoritarian standards of government. Now, here's the next article. Okay? Biden CIA director pick takes aim at China. Biden's shoe-in nominee to be CIA Director William J. Burns delighted senators considering his confirmation by taking a hard line on Beijing. In doing so, however, he went further than Biden has publicly on the question of how to counter an alleged Chinese propaganda campaign inside the United States. Say what now? He said he went on further than Biden has publicly on the question of how to counter an alleged Chinese propaganda campaign in the United States, okay? You know who said this? Not me, not other people from the new black media, okay? We're not saying this. This is being said by the director pick for the CIA. He is the shoe-in. This is Biden's shoe-in. Republicans have been hunting high and low for evidence to support their contention that Beijing Biden favors appeasing China. Nothing significant has materialized to date, but the GOP appears to see the issue as an electoral winner at a time when both parties consider global Sino-U.S. rivalry as a defining foreign policy issue in the foreseeable future. That's the content for Burns' comments yesterday about Confucius Institute. Isn't that the same institute that Ms. Greenfield was paid by? About the Confucius Institute's Chinese language instruction centers operating in partnership with American institutions, but funded and controlled by Beijing. The connection had raised bipartisan U.S. concerns that their actual purpose is to influence public opinion as well as major institutions of higher education. So, Ms. Greenfield, you have been compromised. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, newly confirmed, has faced Republican fire over an October 2019 speech at the Savannah State University that was part of a lecture series sponsored by Confucius Institutes. So now this is another, because the other one they say was in Africa. So now this is some more lectures where she was paid by the Confucius Institute. Okay. As my colleagues John Hudson and Ann Jurian reported yesterday, Thomas Greenfield said that she knew the affiliation when she accepted the engagement, but became alarmed afterward at what she saw as a predatory effort by the Chinese organization to exert influence at the historically black university. So she was just fine doing it elsewhere. Under who? Under whose administration? In his confirmation hearing, Burns placed China at the top of the list of global challenges he would confront if he is confirmed to lead Central Intelligence Agency, as well as the well-regarded career diplomat almost certainly will. Outcompeting China will be key to our national security in the decades ahead, Burns said. For the CIA, that will mean intensified focus and urgency, continually strengthening its already impressive cadre of China specialists, expanding its language skills, aligning personnel and resource allocation for the long haul, and employing a whole agency approach to the operational and analytical changes of this crucial threat. And so my advice for any institutions in the United States, including academic institutions, is to be extraordinarily careful when engaging with them, Burns said. Asked by Collins whether he would recommend shutting them down, Burns said, if I were president of a college, a university, and I had a Confucius Institute, that is certainly what I would do. Okay. Asked whether Biden shared Burns' view, the White House provided a statement that described the institutes as part of China's use of information operations and other coercive and corrupting efforts to undermine and interfere with the democracies, but did not explicitly say yes or no. So why are we signing whole protections into law for a group of people we are at war with? I'm confused. It was the same language State Department spokesman Ned Price used earlier this month in response to fierce Republican criticism of the administration's decision to freeze and effectively kill a requirement that schools disclose their financial connections to the Confucius Institutes. When it comes to this administration, we'll treat Confucius Institutes as part of an overall approach to how best to respond to China's use of information operations and other coercive and corrupting efforts to undermine and interfere in democracies, Price said. He declined to say whether the administration would try to revive the requirement. Oh, let's keep going. Group that sued Harvard asked Supreme Court to end use of race in college admission. A group opposed to affirmative actions in college admissions Thursday asked the Supreme Court to overturn a key precedent that allows schools to consider race when choosing and entering class. Now, let me explain. For civil rights purposes, they changed school admissions to try to make it more fair because they had to do a quota. Like, you have to accept a certain amount of black people. You have to, because before it wasn't, they accepted none. Okay, so you have to have a certain amount of what to make the school diverse. So now Asians are suing Harvard at the Supreme Court. They already lost the case at a local level, or a state level. So now they are suing in the Supreme Court to remove laws that were put in place to protect black people and our admissions for their benefit, so they can rule Harvard, basically, because they're like, Harvard doesn't want to let them in because Harvard's saying it's too many Asians. We're going to have a school full of Asians. We want to be the first. Let me read the article. The petition from Students for Fair Admissions was the expected step in its long-running challenge to Harvard University's admission process. Colleges and universities around the country are watching a case with a major ramifications for the world of competitive admissions. In November, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit upheld a lower court's ruling in 2019 that Harvard does not discriminate against Asian Americans when its undergraduate college uses race and ethnicity as a factor in reviewing applicants. Students for the Fair Admissions filed a suit against Harvard in 2014, alleging that the university violates civil rights laws in ways that penalize Asian Americans. Harvard denied the allegations. Students for the Fair Admissions filed a suit against Harvard in 2014, alleging that the university violates civil rights laws that penalize Asian Americans. Harvard denied the allegations. Harvard continues to argue that creating a diverse campus community is essential to its mission. As earlier court decisions have confirmed, our admission processes are consistent with Supreme Court precedent that the university said in a statement. We will continuously to vigorously defend the rights of Harvard College and every other university and college in the nation to seek educational benefits that come from bringing together a diverse group of students. The Supreme Court upheld the limited use of race in university admissions the last time it considered the issue in 2016. Okay, so here we have, like I said, not only are the Asians getting piggybacking off of what we fought and died for, they're piggybacking off of our civil rights laws. But our Biden's pick for the CIA director himself said that we had issues with the Confucius Institute being paid by Beijing to infiltrate and distribute propaganda in this country through the universities. And now they are suing Harvard for entry into the university, to take over Harvard, because that's what it is. Harvard's like, yo, we got enough Asians, that's enough Asians. They like, no, we want to be everybody on the campus. We want the whole Harvard to be Asian. So how? And then when you go further into this, let's talk about how many spies there have been. Let's just talk about some of the accused, okay? There's Shurin Quinn. In June 2018, Quinn was arrested on accusations that he shipped 78 hydrophones for use in an anti-submarine warfare to the Northwestern Polytech University, which is affiliated with the People's Liberation Army. Okay, let's talk about Ji Zhaoquin. 27, a Chinese citizen residing in Chicago, was arrested in Chicago September 25th, 2018 for allegedly acting with the United States as an illegal agent of the People's Republic of China. Ji worked at the direction of a high-level intelligence office for the Jiangsu Province Ministry and State Security, a provincial department of the Ministry of State Secretary of the People's Republic of China. Okay. Yang Zhangzhu, also known as Q Hu and Zhang Hu, was charged in October 2018 with conspiring and attempting to commit economic espionage and steal trade secrets from multiple U.S. aviation and aerospace companies. So I talked a little bit about melanin and the effects that it has on our bodies, and why they want to suppress that in us. Now I want to bring it a little bit closer to home. Here in New York City, we have specialized testing. I think there's about 8 specialized high schools. And so there's been a bit of a controversy going on about this testing. And as always, I'm going to bring you a point of view that I thought was interesting and different. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into is this is a podcast that had some accounts, that firsthand accounts of students that were accepted to specialized high schools and what they had to go through to get there. Now, I think one student is Latina. I don't believe she's black, or she's not claiming to be black because she didn't say she was. And the other girl, she said she was Jewish. Okay, so I want you to just listen to their accounts of what trying to get into a specialized high school is like.
At Elite Academy in Flushing or A+ Academy in Sunset Park, you'll see middle schoolers sitting in compact feverish rooms working on linear equations and logical reasoning problems, hoping, praying for the chance to attend one of the city's 8 specialized high schools.
I would go, during the school year, every Saturday and Sunday at first for 4 hours each day.
This is Catherine Sanchez, a rising senior from the Bronx, describing the prep she did as a 7th grader to get ready for the SHSAT.
Towards the end of the school year, I started picking up more. So Fridays, I think from 5 to 8. Then over the summer, it was basically 5 days a week.
For how long?
Probably a good 3 to 4 hours every day. A lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot of hours. That's 15 hours a week.
In the summer.
In the summer. She took the specialized high school exam, but the odds of getting in were not in Catherine's favor, especially when you consider the middle school she came from.
Majority Hispanic, majority black. We didn't have any clubs. We had newspaper, but that was about it. Maybe 3 sports teams.
In the Bronx, there are entire neighborhoods that, some years, don't send a single student to specialized high schools. But Catherine wanted to go to Stuyvesant. Her 8th grade teacher told her that no students from the school had gone to Stuyvesant in 2 decades.
I'm a Hispanic woman from the Bronx, and I'm trying to get into Stuy. It's not realistic, whatever. So be it,
Catherine's mom enrolled her in a test prep center called Mamoon's Tutorio.
I was the only Hispanic kid in the class.
Many SHSAT prep centers are located in predominantly Asian neighborhoods. Catherine's was no exception.
There was the Bengali flag in the room. It was in the basement. There was at least 60 people in that room, and it's really only meant to be for 20.
When she first started going to Mamoon's, Catherine's practice exam scores were very low.
I got a 30 in English and an 8 in math. I remember that so clearly. And I was just watching him for the next 2 hours, solve these equations and apply these theorems, and I was like, what the hell is X? It was so challenging to be I'm in the honors class, or I'm supposed to be really smart in comparison to majority of my grade, and I don't know what this is.
Catherine said it felt unfair to be receiving instruction that her peers at school weren't, but she stuck with it. Her practice scores kept climbing, and on test day, in the fall of 8th grade, she took the exam, listed Stuyvesant as her top choice, and waited anxiously for the results. We're going to return to Catherine's story in a bit. First,
Okay, so a couple of things I want you to pay attention to. I want you to pay attention to the fact that she said that the test prep centers are in predominantly Asian communities. Okay, that's number one. I want you to also pay attention to the fact that Catherine was top of her class in her school. She was on track to be valedictorian in her school. And she still needed all of that prep. Let's keep going.
I'm going to introduce you to Charlotte Rich-Jack. Charlotte's also a freshman. She grew up in Washington Heights.
It's a very mixed community, so there's a lot of Jewish people, which I am, a big Dominican community, there's a large African-American community.
Her parents enrolled her in the local elementary school.
But by the time I was in 4th grade, it was time for me to go. I was just very bored academically. I wasn't being challenged. I was the type of kid who could wake up at 8 o'clock, do my homework by 8:15, and be at school by 8:30. So my parents switched me to the Spire Legacy School, which is a small private school on 59th Street for advanced learners. My classes were 12 kids on average. The entire grade was 25.
Tuition at Spire is $43,500 a year. That's above the median annual income in the Bronx.
Specialized high schools weren't looked at as the dream schools at my school at all. They were your backups. They were what you went to if you didn't get into the privates.
Still, Charlotte says most of her classmates, including her, took the specialized high school exam.
I took a practice test the day after I got out of school in 7th grade.
After that,
tutoring sessions and more diagnostics, and I wouldn't say that I did a ton of work to get in because I also had a pretty good middle school education, but I definitely did prep for it.
You're probably starting to get a sense of how resources influence who gets into specialized high schools.
What I want you to pay attention to here is Charlotte said that as she got bored, her parents put her in a different school. Now, I've seen this for myself with students who other people looked at as misbehaving, not too rambunctious for the class, all over the place, maybe even talking back, but what happened when the parent took her son out of the school and she put him in a school that had all these kind of electronics or something or other, and the boy flourished because he was in an environment that stimulated him and, that was interesting to him, and he was able to learn, and he wasn't constantly trying to find things to do while in class because he was very stimulated by the actual classroom. Now, I had run into a lady one time and she was telling me about her daughter. Her daughter was about 5 or 6 years old and her daughter was having the same issues. Like she was just talking too much in class. She wasn't paying attention. And I told her, your child is bored. Maybe you need to give the child extra work if you can't, put your child in a different school, but your child is bored. And a few weeks later, she came to me and told me, you were right, that she had, I think she got her put into a different classroom or something or other. Somehow she was able to, or gave her some more work or something. She was able to solve the problem, but the answer to the solution wasn't that the little girl was bad or she was trying to cause trouble. It was that she was bored, okay? So I just want you to keep that in mind, especially when it comes to our black boys, but our girls too get bored now, come on. Now that we moved on to that, I want to talk about Charlotte. Now, Charlotte said that her school was $43,000 a year. Now, how equal can it be when to get into the school, you need a prep? You need to go to a school to prepare you for the prep. And then the prep, as we saw, or I don't know if we got to that part already, but the prep is like $2,000 or something like that for the summer. $2,500, $3,500, something like that. So you see how expensive this prep is. How equal is it? Okay. She said there was 12 students in her class. You see how important class sizes are, and 25 students in the grade. She also said that specialized high schools were not a goal in her community. They were a backup. That's our goal.
You are rewarded more for extremely high scores on one section than you are for very high scores on both sections.
It's kind of weird. You have a better chance of getting in if you get 100 on one section and a 60 on the other than if you get a 90 on both.
So the test is 114 questions, 57 math, 57 verbal. All but 5 are multiple choice. You have 90 minutes to do each section, which is about 1.5 minutes per question.
After 13 months of test prep at a cost of about $2,500, Catherine did well enough on the exam to get into Stuyvesant.
Once I did prove myself, people were like, oh my god, so smart, you get in. I was like, okay.
I met Catherine in the fall through Caliber, Stuyvesant's literary magazine. As she is 2 years ahead of me, I've looked to her for advice on the upcoming years. I asked Catherine to describe her experience walking into Sty for the very first time.
Here I was, walking with my, totally dark cousin to school, and she was like, no one here looks like us, and I was like, yeah. And it was just, terrifying, truly mortifying.
You heard us to be the smart kids of New York City, but that's definitely not what plays out. It's definitely more which kids whose parents have the money to pay for resources.
Oftentimes in conversations about diversity, the focus is on providing access and opportunity to underprivileged students. But Charlotte says the lack of diversity is also harming privileged students.
My school's dead in the center of the Bronx, and there are all these kids from the Upper West Side that take private bus services to get to school. So they take Valor to school, they have their specialized education, they take a private bus service home to the Upper West Side. They have no sense of the real world. New York City to them is going to my perfect school in the middle of nowhere and then going back to Manhattan.
If I had my way, there would not be a single test. I don't even understand why Albany gets to decide anything about our specialized high schools to begin with. This should be a local decision.
He brings up this legal barrier.
Are you talking about the state law?
Yeah, exactly. Back in 1971, when civil rights groups started pressing the chancellor, a guy named Harvey Scribner, on the lack of diversity in specialized schools, the state legislature responded by throwing together a bill that enshrined the single test admissions policy in state law. And it's still in the books today.
I still can't get over that. How the state could decide local school admissions policy.
And the real irony is that there were way more Black and Hispanic students at specialized high schools in the 1970s than there are today.
So Taylor.
So I want you to peep how they passed the bill in the 70s, which I'm sure was a result of the civil rights movement in the 60s. It was part of that affirmative action thing to try to make the specialized high schools more diverse, that fake word diverse, and more fair. Right? So letting in more Black students, right? And it worked at first, but it took them 50 years to perfect it. And now we're barely getting any in at all. Don't you think that's interesting? I also want you to see now, look at the next video. I want you to see who is big mad and who's hot as fish grease. And I want you to tell me once again that we got allies.
And racism! And racism! And racism! They never had this problem when Stuyvesant was all white. They never had this problem when Stuyvesant was all Jewish. Now all of a sudden they see it one too many Chinese and they say, hey, it's not right.
How do you get into those specialized high school? By studying, studying, and studying.
Learn to serve the Black and Hispanic kids in your own public schools first before messing with the seating of 3,000 kids.
Okay, so I want you to peep how that bill was created and passed to combat the discrimination that Black people encountered in education, in the education process. It took them 50 years to perfect the system to push us out, where they dumbed down our students with the schools, they boosted up the test, and then gave their students, outside test prep, okay? So now I want you to peep that the people that are big mad, upset, hot as fish grease, that bill wasn't even put in place to protect those people. And this is why we say tangibles 2020, because they get us with the trick bag of helping minorities. It helps all the minorities except for us, and see how the other minorities, they like, oh, well, we don't care that y'all can't get in. Fix your stuff. We don't care. You're going to hurt us. And we don't care about you. But they in that school because of us fighting for equality in the 60s. I just want you to keep that in mind. Okay. Let's talk about another Asian spy. Zhu Dong-yo, also known as William Yo, 57, a naturalized U.S. citizen. He was given citizenship. A naturalized U.S. citizen wanted for the alleged involvement in the theft of proprietary information from a locomotive manufacturer in Chicago, Illinois. Yo is currently at large and believed to be residing in China. On November 18, 2015, Yo traveled from China to O'Hare Airport, blah, blah, blah. Let's read another one. There's so many of them. On September 16, 2019, Zhou Lu was arrested in Fort Lee, New Jersey by federal agents and charged with conspiracy to commit visa fraud for his involvement in a conspiracy to fraudulently obtain U.S. visas for Chinese government employees. U.S. Attorney Jeffrey S. Barron stated, as alleged, Zhou Lu conspired to obtain research scholar visas fraudulently for people whose actual alleged purpose was not to research, but recruitment. Zhong Zhang, in December 2019, Zhong Zhang, a medical student from China, was arrested at Logan Airport for stealing vials of biological research and attempting to smuggle them out of the United States aboard a flight destined for China. Zhong Zhang stated that he intended to bring the vials to China to use them to conduct research in his own laboratory. Oh, let's keep going. On January 28, 2020, the FBI issued an arrest warrant for Yang King Yi on charges of being an agent of the foreign government for visa fraud, making false statements, and conspiracy. Yang is a lieutenant of the People's Liberation Army, the armed forces of the People's Republic of China, and a member of the Chinese Communist Party. While studying at Boston University Department of Physics and Chemistry and Biomedical Engineering from October 2017 to 2019, Yi allegedly continued to work as a PLA lieutenant, completing numerous assignments from PLA offices, such as conducting research, assessing U.S. military websites, and sending U.S. state documents and information to China. Let's keep going. I can keep going. An Ming-Hu is an associate professor at the Department of Mechanical, Aerospace, and Biomedical Engineering. Are y'all hearing me? At the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, was arrested February 27, 2020, and charged with 3 counts of fraud and 3 counts of making false statements. He allegedly committed fraud by hiding his relationship with the Chinese university while receiving funding from NASA. Simon Saul Tian-Yang. On May 8, 2020, Simon Saul Tian-Yang, 63, of Fayetteville, Arkansas, was arrested and charged with wire fraud. Yang alleged had close ties with the Chinese government and Chinese companies and failed to disclose ties when required to do so to receive grant money from NASA. You see, they get into key positions in key places. Are y'all hearing me? And we are giving them protections under our government. At the same time, no, not we. Who is giving them protection under our government? Why is he giving them protections under our government? And he knows all of this. Kamala Harris works for the Intelligence Committee. She talks about that all the time, and she was on the Intelligence Committee. So all these things right here, she knows. So why are they giving them extra protections under the law? Oh, we're going to keep going because I'm going to make a point tonight. Where was I at? Quinn Wang. On May 14, 2020, Dr. Quinn Wang, a former Cleveland Clinic Foundation employee, was arrested and charged with false claims and wire fraud and more than $3.6 million in grant money. They giving them all kinds of money, left and right, grant money from NASA and this and that and that. $3.6 million in grant funding he received from the National Institute of Health. Dr. Wang is also accused of being part of China's 1,000 Talents program. Okay. Quinn Wang, Jun Tang, Chen Song, and Kai Zhou. 4 Chinese nationals have been charged with visa fraud on June 7, 2020. Jing Wang was arrested at Los Angeles, California airport and charged with visa fraud. Wang, a scientific researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, an officer of the People's Republic of China's Liberation Army, is also charged with falsifying his U.S. visa application and accused of stealing secrets from the medical researchers and sending them to a military lab in China. Chen Song and Kai Zhao were both arrested in July 2020 for lying on their visa applications to conceal their affiliation